What's up YouTube, Capital G here. Welcome to another episode of Boomer Bust. If you guys remember in the last Boomer Bust video where we broke down the Evil Eye archetype, I did say that I would be reviving this series and I would try to upload it regularly. If you guys did not see that video, just know, I guess to give you the most brief of explanations, Boomer Bust is one giant general discussion about a brand new archetype that just got released into TCG or an older archetype that's getting legacy support of significant value. I like to break down these discussions into 5 sections for the most part: origins of the archetype, what the archetype does well, where the archetype struggles and some of its drawbacks. Then I like to talk about how I think the archetype is going to fare in the meta, and I give a final verdict on the archetype. So we talked about Evil Eye in the last Boomer Bust, but in this video we are going to be talking about the Witchcrafter archetype. Witchcrafter, just like Evil Eye, is a new archetype that is premiering in Infinity Chasers, the recent booster sets. This archetype is completely spellcaster based and the attribute pool is all over the place. In that respect, it does kind of sound like Altergeist, but it is very unlike Altergeist in the makeup of the archetype. This archetype is actually much more similar to something like Prophecy because the spell cards are pretty much like what make this archetype very unique. This archetype does have one trap card to its name, but it's not significant or even good or kind of relevant. This is an archetype where the spellcasters and the spells themselves are mainly what are going to facilitate a lot of your plays. The monsters can kind of be broken down into 2 parts because this archetype does not have any extra deck cards. I think that for the most part you have the low level monsters and then you have the boss monsters. The boss monsters are the cards that basically bring the heat to the deck. There would give you your disruption and there would allow you to do a lot of your damage. The low level monsters all kind of facilitate you getting the boss monsters on the field. Every single one of them can pull the boss monsters straight from the deck, which is kind of nice. And then they all have nice little utility effects from the graveyard, like anything ranging from a Foolish Burial to a draw one and then discard a Witchcrafter card, which is kind of nice. Now the spells are super unique and they really are what give this archetype its flair and its identity. The spell cards in Witchcrafter, if you look at them on the surface value, their actual effects as spells, it's nothing out of the ordinary. A lot of the spells do things that we've already seen a billion times. A Rhoda effect, a Monster Reborn, a continuous spell card that gives your Witchcrafter monsters a lot of protection from destruction in battle. But when you look at their secondary effects, it's super unique. These secondary effects of the Witchcrafter cards allow the Witchcrafter spells to actually add themselves back to your hand, or in some cases put themselves back on the field during your end phase if you did not actually activate them as spells. When it comes to what Witchcrafters do well, I feel like there are 2 aspects in particular where Witchcrafters definitely excel. Number 1 would be their excellent and fantastic boss monsters, Witchcrafter Master Vere and Witchcrafter Hane in particular. These cards are not only good like bodies to put on field, they just kind of feel like roadblocks for your opponent because they both have quick effects that are disruptive and just kind of annoying to deal with. Hane is your spot removal card. It can pop any face-up card your opponent has by just discarding a spell. Keep in mind, if you discard any of your Witchcrafter cards, obviously you can just put them back in your hand during your end phase. This can pop any monster your opponent has, a Floodgate. If your opponent has one of those Rhoda, field spells like Trickstar Lightstage or the Hidden City, the super popular ones in the meta, you can pop those cards. They won't get that surge. Witchcrafter Master Vere actually has 2 kind of disruptive effects. She can actually bolster the stat of any Witchcrafter monster that you have, so she can do that by just revealing spell cards from your hand. Doesn't actually cost you any advantage. She also has an effect that is kind of like a Destiny Hero Plasma, where she can negate the effects of all monster effects or all monsters your opponent has. This is non-targeting disruption, which is obviously like the best type of disruption in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it kind of is just like an effect that can turn off all your opponent's monster effects for their entire turn. It's obviously like super good. I also think that, we talked about earlier how the spells have the effect to add themselves to your hand or put themselves potentially on the field for free. This is another effect that really this is something else that really sets this archetype apart. Not only can these effects be super good when you combine them with the boss monsters, because the boss monsters do require that you discard spell cards, and if you are discarding your Witchcrafter spells, adding them back to the hand for free, obviously super nice. But they can even be fodder for things like Twin Twister, where you can just pitch them if you're going second. You can pop a couple cards on your opponent's side of the field, and then you you can just add that card back to your hand. And I think that it's just really nice to have this utility where you can have, for instance, Witchcrafter Creation. This is essentially their reinforcements of the army. You can draw one copy of this card, and through the span of a duel that might be like 6 turns, you might end up using that same copy of the card 3 times, where you're just activating it one turn, next turn putting it back to your hand, during that following turn activating it again. And it's just like having that dual utility of a card is something that you definitely would want in a lot of decks. Now, when it comes to some of the struggles that Witchcrafter have and some of the drawbacks of the archetype, there are definitely a few of them. I've been talking a lot in this video about the awesome ability that all the Witchcrafter spells have, where they can add themselves back from your graveyard or put themselves on the field potentially for free during each one of your end phases, and that is absolutely amazing. But what I haven't told you yet is about half of the spells in this archetype are like super underwhelming. Yes, it's awesome to have a Monster Reborn and to have a Rhoda and to have, Witchcrafter Biostreak, which basically is like Salamangreat Balinx for any of your Witchcrafter monsters, giving them protection the first time they would be destroyed by battle or card effect. Those are all fantastic cards. I would run those, but some of the other ones are just way too situational and underwhelming, and I don't really think that this is an archetype with a ton of good spells. They've got a couple of good spells, but overall, the spell count is a complete mixed bag in my opinion. I also think that there could be a serious problem with the low-level monsters. The way that it works is all the low-level monsters contribute themselves, and they can discard a card. It's a cost, by the way, to summon any of your boss monsters from the deck. It's a quick effect, and it's awesome because essentially it means you don't have to draw the boss monsters to get them on board. The problem is, if you get Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, it is absolutely a nightmare. I know that it is only one specific card, but you have to understand Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is the most popular card in the entire TCG, and if your opponent ashes you, not only are you going to lose your normal summon, but you're also going to lose that monster. You're going to lose the spell card. If it was a Witchcrafter card, chances are you're not going to have a face-up Witchcrafter monster for the rest of the turn, so you're not going to be able to recover that card, and basically you just go neg 1 and you have absolutely no field presence. There's also the kind of weird, I guess, dichotomy with the boss monsters where you definitely want to get them on field because they're so good, but you never want to draw these things. Witchcrafter Master Vere and Hane are level 8 and level 7 respectively, and there really isn't a good way of getting them on the field if you happen to hard draw them. I guess there's Witchcrafter Adele, which has the ability that lets you special summon a Witchcrafter monster from your hand, as opposed to the standard summoning a Witchcrafter monster from your deck that all the low-level monsters do. The problem with Witchcrafter Adele is, and keep in mind, she's generally like accepted to be the worst monster in the entire archetype, she in herself is also a high-level monster. So if you're playing Witchcrafter Adele, it's like you're playing a high-level monster in case you draw a high-level monster. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you happen to draw the Witchcrafter boss monsters Vere and Hane, you honestly just have to deal with it, and it's probably going to be a dead card in your hand for a very long time. Now, when it comes to how Witchcrafter are going to fare in the competitive meta, right now I don't think they're going to do that well. I think that probably they would be just a local level deck. People don't generally like to run decks that don't have single card engines, and sadly this deck really doesn't have any single card engines. There are no cards in this deck where you activate them and they can be like +1s or +2s or anything like that. And I think that the fact that if you draw the boss monsters, they're basically bricks for a very long time, maybe even the entire game. I think that that is going to seriously turn people off. Now, with that said, I will not give this deck a full-on bust. I actually want to give this deck what I call a conditional bust, and what that actually means is we know of one of the new cards that this archetype is going to be getting in Rising Rampage. It's another boss monster, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's very similar in terms of quality to Master Vere and Hane. It's actually one that doesn't really suffer from the same issues as those cards do, because this is a monster that can actually special summon itself. It's called Witchcrafter Golem Arles, and Arles is a monster that anytime one of your Witchcrafter monsters on field is targeted by a card effect or targeted for an attack, you can summon Arles from your hand. Arles is level 8, it's 2800 attack, and what Arles does is at the same time that you're summoning it, you target a card on your opponent's side of the field, or you target a Witchcrafter spell in your graveyard and you return that card to your hand, then you special summon it. This means that when you summon Arlay, you either get to bounce one of your opponent's monsters or you get to add one of your spells from the graveyard. Either way, it's just an excellent card, and it feels like at worst, this card is something that can just summon itself to the field, be a 2800 like wall your opponent has to deal with, and it can recover one of your cards. At best, it can bounce one of your opponent's extra deck monsters back to their field, and again, it summons itself for free. Even better, this card actually returns itself to the hand during your opponent's standby phase. Some people might be like, well, why exactly is that good, Cap? Because what it allows you to do is during your turn, you can beat your opponent over the head with that 2800 attack, but during their turn, it bounces itself to the hand so that you can resummon it again and hopefully bounce another one of their monsters or recover another one of your cards. So this is one of the boss monsters in the deck that actually can be used offensively, defensively, and allows you to recover resources all at the same time, and it can be summoned multiple times over the span of a couple of turns. So I feel like when they get this card, because it's so incredibly strong, I actually feel like Witchcraft will be able to top 8 regionals, but this card is not coming out for a couple of booster sets. So right now, I would give Witchcraft a bust, but it's a conditional bust, and it's kind of like we'll reevaluate this after the Witchcrafter Golem Arliss comes out, because I think when they get that card, I think this could actually be a regional top 8 level. It will definitely have to be a deck that plays a control grind game, because that's the playstyle that the deck is most suited for. But I feel like the boss monsters of the deck are just like such fantastic cards, and I think that Golem Arliss is going to take the deck to a little bit of a higher level. So whatever you guys think of the Witchcrafter archetype, do you love it, like it, hate it, or anything in between? Leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.